Changes in climate are affecting the production of food around the world. Diseases, pests, and weeds that attack our food crops are moving into new regions. If our crops cannot withstand these threats and be resilient to increasing heat, drought, and salinity, there will be many more hungry people in the world, beyond the 820 million today. This is especially true for Africa, where yields are generally low and the majority of population growth is expected. Time is short and we need multiple tools, including safe new technologies for swift and effective options to grow food for the world's people, using less land, water, and chemicals. At 2Blades, we help to develop crops that are more resilient to plant disease and pests. One example uses advanced tools to target Asian soybean rust, a devastating disease of soybean currently managed by spraying heavily with fungicides, and even these are losing efficacy. In Africa, soybean is a key crop for smallholders, delivering nutrition for people, livestock, and soils, and good income. But Asian soybean rust can wipe out the crop in just 3 weeks. We are working with partners such as Bayer Crop Science, the Sainsbury Laboratory, and Kaneka Corporation to accelerate climate adaptation for our food crops. Please join us in this project to help adapt crops to climate threats and to help deliver safe, affordable, and sustainable food systems for people and the planet.
Hi, I'm Toshiyuki Komori from Kaneka Corporation. I appreciate having this opportunity to discuss our transformation technology for gene discovery. Kaneka is a chemical company, and our products include plastics, electronics, medical instruments, foods, and so on. Recently, in response to the imminent food crisis, Kaneka has been focusing on agri-bio business. Our team, Plant Breeding Technology Unit, aims to support food production through breeding of innovative varieties using biotechnology. We believe our efforts will contribute towards sustaining a healthy Earth. Our key technologies are shown here. Last year, Kaneka acquired the plant biotechnology team of Japan Tobacco. Thus, the two teams were combined, and these two complementary technologies for genetic manipulation have been integrated. IPB technology enables rapid breeding and DNA-free gene editing in commercial varieties of various crops, including soybean. Pure Intro technology enables precise gene integration and is used as the industry standard for GM maize breeding. When Pure Intro is combined with proper varieties, transformation efficiency can be extremely high, which enables high-throughput gene screening. We have developed high-throughput screening systems in wheat and rice, and actually run several screening programs. In the wheat system, hundreds of constructs may be introduced into wheat annually by a few technicians in search of beneficial genes for wheat improvement. Maize system is less efficient, but super efficient rice system can be used to find genes for maize application. One of the wheat programs is the research collaboration with 2Blades. The project was originally started by Japan Tobacco in 2018 and assigned to Kaneka. We are pleased to tell you that our technology has helped identify many resistance genes against major diseases of wheat. Thank you for listening.
Plants have an immune system. Many of the components of that were identified by work done at the Sainsbury Laboratory. And what we aim to do is identify the genes that are responsible for allowing plants to resist disease. And then we can take durable combinations of those genes and we can introduce them into crop species. We work very closely with 2Blades to do that, and through industrial partners, and also in low and middle income countries. So we deploy the very latest technologies in gene editing and gene manipulation in order to try and combat plant diseases and accelerate breeding and make plant breeding much more of a precision science. So our aim in this regard is to try and make sure that we have plant diseases that are really associated with being able to resist a whole range of different pathogens. And here's a couple of examples of that. In potato late blight, one of the most important diseases of potato, we've identified work that my colleague Jonathan Jones has led. We've identified genes from non-hosts of the disease, from wild Solanum species related to potato, and introgress those in a number of combinations into commercial potato varieties such as Maris piper. And we can produce potato varieties that then are able to resist disease. And this is work we've carried out in close collaboration with 2Blades involving Camille Wittek, who's going to be talking in a moment. In addition, we work on soybean rust, another absolutely devastating disease, which is so important really across the world, and particularly for subsistence agriculture, where it has great potential as a food security crop. Again, we're identifying genes that we can deploy to try and understand how that disease works, and working with commercial partners through 2Blades to do that. And finally, rice blast disease, a disease that claims enough rice to feed 60 million people each year. We're working throughout sub-Saharan Africa to bring together durable combinations of genes that would resist rice blast and allow for high-yielding, locally adapted cultivars of rice to be deployed, carrying combinations of rice blast resistance that will be durable in the long term. That's the aim of our work, and we're very committed to doing that, and very committed to our partnership with 2Blades to achieve those aims.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kamil Wittek, and I'm from 2Blades. 2Blades is a charitable organization from US established in 2004, and our goal is to deliver innovative disease resistance solution. So there is a gap between discovery and moving the discovery to the field, moving these solutions to the field. And what we want to do is to bridge this gap. We have our own laboratories to do own discoveries, and one of the laboratories is based at the Sainsbury Laboratory in Norwich, as Nick mentioned a moment ago. We also have another lab in US. And we also work with partners to help them to identify and license emerging technologies. We advance these discoveries with whatever is needed. We help with project management, with IP. We do field trials to deliver it to farmers in developed and developing world. And for this, we partner with different institutions, with the companies and local partners in sub-Saharan Africa. So the mission of 2Blades is to bridge this innovation gap in agriculture, to develop long-lasting solutions to crop diseases caused by pests and pathogens. By this, we want to address climate change through mitigation and adaptation, and provide the solution which will allow us to use less resources and produce more food. And 2Blades is quite a unique organization. We have this dual market approach where we work with large industrial partners, and we also retain the rights to use our discoveries for charitable work for smallholders, for example, in Africa or Asia. A couple of examples of our work. We use genetic solutions. We work with partners to use genetic solutions to deliver resistance to bacterial wilt in tomato. For example, here you can see healthy plants without any chemical spraying. We are also part of the work of seed in Africa to develop Victoria 3R. So these are potatoes resistant to Phytophthora infestans, having 3 genes. And very recently, this is work in wheat resistance to stem rust with several genes stuck together. So over the years, we developed a lot of partnerships with institutions and universities for upstream discovery. And we also partner with many companies for downstream delivery. These are large commercial partners, but we also work with charitable organizations in developing countries.
I'm Shelley Horesco. I am the Global Portfolio Lead for Disease Management at Bayer Crop Science. And what that means is I work across biotechnology, the biologics organization, the small molecules organization, our breeding organization, to bring forward the R&D strategy to develop the crop strategies that Bayer envisions being important in the future. My industry career started at a small company here in St. Louis. We developed some nematode chemistries, and then we were bought by Monsanto. And during my time at Monsanto, I had several different roles, one of which was leading the biotech effort for disease control. And that's where I got connected to 2Blades. We started a corn program with them, and we're really pretty impressed with what they could deliver. You've heard about that from both Nick and Camille. And so then we had 2 follow-on collaborations, which are still ongoing in soybeans. And then Monsanto was bought by Bayer, which is how I arrived at Bayer Crop Science in my current role on the crop technology team. But I've been really fortunate for all of my career. The companies that I've worked for have been very interested in things like jobs, food security, and improving yields in regions of the world where we don't really create value for the company, but we create value for people and for society. And a few of those are listed up here on the slide. One of them is telemaize. This is a project or an initiative that was started by Legacy Monsanto to bring water efficient and pest resistant maize to Africa. Again, these are parts of Africa where we're unlikely to make any money on these products, but we feel that it's our responsibility to bring our knowledge forward to help with food security. And it's through our experience with the telemaize, getting it into the right genetic background for Africa, being able to navigate some of the regulatory challenges that you have in Africa, that we think are going to bring value to the mycotoxin reduction program that 2Blades is initiating. And we're really excited to be partners in that effort with them. Then finally, I lead the breeding and genetics work stream for the TR4 Alliance. This is an alliance that Bayer has been a big part of. We're trying to get funding to help to reduce the impacts of TR4 disease in bananas. Bananas are a staple crop for rural parts of Africa. With the number of people that we need to feed by 2050, we really can't afford to lose any of our staple crops. And so we've been working on this initiative for the last 2 years. We're still working on getting funding, but the hope is that not only will we be able to control TR4 disease, but we will be building the infrastructure in Tanzania and Kenya that will help to combat or to discover solutions for any disease that happens to hit bananas in Africa. Also just bringing together the right team of pathologists who can really start to study some of these diseases and understand their biology. So this has been a really exciting project to work on. Again, still working on getting funding, but hopefully that will take off soon. I'm really glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Delighted to be here with all of you. My name is Elle. I'm a product development manager at Pivot Bio. And what we're working on is replacing synthetic nitrogen with a more sustainable form of nitrogen that comes from soil microbes. And so our mission as a company is we want to serve farmers to steward natural resources and to feed and power the planet. So if you look at synthetic nitrogen, we really see a nitrogen dilemma, because it has really played such a pivotal role in enabling our world to produce as much food as we are producing now. And it's played that role for 100 years, but it's also come at this cost that now we are exceeding planetary boundaries for how much nitrogen is flowing through the environment. And part of this picture is that, nitrous oxide is 300 times as potent as a greenhouse gas as carbon dioxide. So yeah, we have this nitrogen dilemma that we're facing. And what we're doing at Pivot Bio is we are using microbes to feed nitrogen to plants. So the way it works is that the microbes grow on the roots of the plant. They grow with it throughout the season. And every day they're pulling nitrogen from the atmosphere and spoon feeding it directly to the plant. And this has a number of advantages. We can achieve basically more than a 90% reduction in greenhouse gas from synthetic nitrogen fertilizer through two modes of action. The first being that we see a very large reduction in the emissions from manufacture. It is much less energy intensive to ferment microbes than it is to produce fertilizer from the Haber-Bosch process. The second mode is that because those microbes are spoon feeding the nitrogen directly to the plant, it eliminates the nitrogen that is lost to the environment, that runs off into waterways, that volatilizes as nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. And so those two pieces are really important, but perhaps more important of all is that it is a better tool for farmers. It's a better source of nitrogen. It's more reliable because that nitrogen stays with the plant. It doesn't run away with the water. It's cost effective, and it's delivering that nutrition directly to the crop root throughout the season while the grower is maintaining their productivity and yield. And so by tapping into nature's biology to deliver nitrogen, what we're doing is we're decoupling plant nutrition and agricultural yield from the energy-intensive Haber-Bosch process, which we use a lot right now. And so our commitment in our sprint is to accelerate the science and the real-world use of microbes to supply crop nutrition. And we're committing over $291 million in the next 4 years. We already have a pretty good start. In the US in 2022, farmers used our microbes on over 3 million acres. But that's just a small step in the larger picture of what we need to do. If we were to able to expand globally, there's the potential to reduce over 500 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So the other part of this is that we believe that good tools should be available to all farmers, especially smallholder farmers who are on the front lines of climate change. When the weather changes, when the rain stops or there's too much rain, it's really hard to grow a crop. And not only that, but they are also the first responders for global food security. Smallholders currently produce over 2/3 of global food production. And so they're also a really large solution to global food security. So we have a strong commitment to make our products available to smallholders, to be able to serve them. We've started some initial steps in Kenya, and we're more than open to partnership and discussions. You can follow the link or use the QR code to learn more there. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I think you can see my screen. Yeah, Pete Goldsmith. I'm a professor at the University of Illinois, and the University of Illinois leads and has led the USAID's major investment in soybean development in Africa called the Soybean Innovation Lab for Soybean Value Chain Research. And we're started in 2013, this lab, about 60 researchers working in over 25 countries in 140 locations. We just were recently funded. Our success has brought on an additional $30 million in funding through 2027 to continue this foundation building for soybean in emerging markets, principally sub-Saharan Africa. A fundamental question was asked back in 2012, actually, when we started putting the lab together was why soybean for Africa? And this is a question that USAID, a very profound question, because they had not made a major investment in soybean before, but they looked to South America and the development of soybean there in tropical settings, in rural areas with very limited agricultural production, and saw tremendous growth. And they saw this economic engine bring protein and oil to regions that at best had starch production from tropical staples. So the idea for why soybean in Africa is, can it be transformative to the food and landscapes? And let me make sure there we go. And so soybean does a lot of really good things. It's an easy case to make why it is fundamental for agricultural development and poverty reduction, as well as food security. One of the most important things is that it's climate adapted. Soybean grows without any yield reduction from 40 degrees north latitude, 45 degrees north to 45 south, elevations of 1,500 meters down to sea level. The Soybean Innovation Lab, these are 140 locations, produce 500,000 data points a year of yield and disease resistance and performance across a very varied set of agroecological zones. And so that soybean has shown and at the varietal level to be quite robust, making it well adapted. Certainly soil improvements critical, from contribution of soybean, fixing nitrogen for not only its own crop, but for the follow-on crop, deep roots, soil tilth, lots of very good things. Building organic matter in tropical soils are notoriously low in organic matter. Low input in that it does not require nitrogen fertilization. So this is very well adapted and appropriate technology for small and medium sized farmers operating in the developing world. So it's a low cost to put the crop in. One of the most important things, and one of the more less well understood, is that the industrial multipliers of soybean are extremely high, meaning that upchain in inputs, downchain in processing food, feed, livestock, industrial materials, fuels, that soybean creates a lot of economic activity, jobs, so that countries that have employed soybean for its protein and oil industrial standard enjoy tremendous multipliers. Farmers achieve high profitabilities per hectare, so it competes well. Many of you know protein and oil are very high in soybean, and they're scarce in the tropics. So there's a nice complementarity there. Deflationary in terms of import substitution, and it makes a great rotation crop, as the South American farmers have shown quite well. The graph on the right-hand side reflects why this is transformative, and this soybean revolution is underway in Africa. You see an index of hectares planted in crops from cowpea all the way through to soybean, starting back in 2010. So the last 10 years, and soybean farmers are switching into soybean because it is viable when the technology suite is deployed. It is a commercial crop, and it requires a significant change in practice, but when done, and it is an appropriate crop, so there's not, it is adoptable. You're looking at a compound annual growth rate of soybean hectares at more than double what's going on in any other crop, and you're looking at about a 7% compound annual growth rate. So it's farmers are switching to the crop, the processors are buying the crop and processing the crop, and the oil and protein are making their way into the market. So there is a high demand and the ability to supply that demand. So it's a very exciting time. It's early days, but soybean has shown to be a very, very successful crop for small and medium holders in emerging markets. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete, and thank you to all of the panelists for talking about the areas that you each contribute to as it relates to developing robust food systems. I'd like to take the opportunity now to hear from you individually to talk about what are the primary goals that you have from each of your perspectives, from the technology end out to the last mile in the field with growers, as we've heard each of you speak to from different perspectives. What for you would be success in terms of a future food system in the area in which you work? And what are the resources that are needed in order for that success to be achieved? And I will just hand that question over to Nick for starters.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Diana. So I think that from our perspective, what we really want to see is farming moving to a fossil-free status. You know, we want it to be able to move to a situation where it's truly sustainable, and that we actually are off the chemical treadmill, that we've replaced the use of fungicides with genetic solutions to crop diseases. That's our overall aim. So to try and do that, what we need is to have we need to be able to deploy our technologies appropriately. We need a straightforward and robust, resilient regulatory system, but that would enable genetic technologies to be deployed widely. We need to have a debate more generally with consumers, with policymakers about the benefits of precision breeding and precision genetic technologies to enable us to actually make that transition to truly sustainable agriculture. So I think those are the key things, the key aims for us. We know that we have the scientific resources to do this. We have the scientific understanding of the immune system of plants to actually be able to do this. We know we can identify new sources of resistance, and we know that we can deploy them in most major crop species. So it's really a case of ensuring now that the ability to deploy those widely across the world is present, and that's going to take a lot of dialogue with policymakers and indeed with the general public more widely to explain the long-term benefits of these types of technologies to humanity.
Thank you, Nick. Elle, could you share the same? What is the success defined for Pivot, and what do you need to achieve that?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess when I think about success in food systems, I really think, bold action to rapidly reduce emissions across all sectors, not just agriculture, and bring us closer to that 1.5 degree world. That is so important because, of course, agriculture depends a lot on the climate, and the more our climate changes, the harder it gets for growers. So I think the other pieces are that, for thinking about like the stability and the availability of tools for growers, there isn't going to be one solution that solves agriculture all across the world. So much is going to be changing. That's a part of climate change. And being able to provide more tools that farmers can access. So of course, I'm thinking about like stable fertilizer supply, which was really affected this year with the war in Ukraine, and thinking about what are the other sources where farmers can get that fertilizer. But then also thinking about, the weather's going to be changing, which means I think another huge piece of this puzzle is distribution of crops. Some areas are going to be suffering more. Some areas might actually be able to produce more because they have better rainfall patterns. So how do we think creatively about a food system that can distribute food more effectively as the weather patterns change? And then I really love this panel because we really do need this rapid scale up in these technologies that are affecting, that are looking at how we make disease resistance, how do we make drought resistance, how are we providing farmers with the tools that they need? And perhaps the last piece that's on my mind is I really think that smallholders should be at the core of this climate conversation because they have such a big role to play, because they are so heavily affected. Every time we talk or think about climate change, we should be thinking about smallholder farmers.
Yes, very, very important concepts. Camille, how would you describe what success is for 2Blades and what's needed to achieve it?
Yes, so when I think about this from 2Blades perspective, for me, it's important that we can adapt our crops to changing climate conditions, adapt them to biotic and abiotic stress. The climate has, warming climate, for example, has huge influence on the pathogen, the spread of the pathogens. They go to the new habitats, plants are more stressed and they need more protection. And considering that the population is growing, we need to protect the plant in more sustainable way, in more environmentally friendly way. Ideally, we would do less spraying, we would use more natural solutions, disease resistance, what Nick has mentioned. There is tremendous progress in understanding how plant immune system works, and we can use it to protect our plants against diseases. And the food system, food supply, there should be also a big focus on the local food supply. Again, putting focus on the local food supply and local food production makes it more resilient to all the shock and distortions from the climate change. And I fully agree with Nick. What we need, we have a lot of good technologies and understanding. In 2Blades, we have many genes and solutions which can be directly applied to protect our plants against diseases. But the policymakers are there not yet. There are unnecessary hurdles and obstacles to apply the solutions we have. So this has to change. They have to catch up with the technology and understand that it has to be done quickly to protect plants against diseases and protect our food chain. And I think also another thing which comes to my mind is R&D, research and development is, there's not money in the R&D system. Especially if we think about R&D in plant in UK, I believe it's only 3% of all R&D money is going to the plant science. And if we consider that we do rely on plants for our food production, for feeding livestock, and also carbon sequestration, it's shocking how much little money is going into R&D on plant science.
Thanks. And I just want to encourage any of the panelists, if they have comments on any of these responses, feel free to jump in.
Can I say something? Hey, so for Bayer's successes, we've committed to reducing greenhouse gas from agriculture by 2030, by 30% by 2030, and to reach 100 million smallholder farmers. So I totally agree with everything that Elle said about smallholder farmers sort of being at the forefront of, food security in their local regions. But for Bayer, the sweet spot really is our major agronomic, agricultural, large commercial industry in both North America and South America. And so we're also, we're working on some of these projects that I talked about previously that will really hit smallholder farmers. But we're also very much focused on our sweet spot, which is, the commercial ag industry in North and South America, and trying to come up with products and innovate in ways that will help them to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions over the next, 5 or 10 years. And one of the new technologies that we have coming out is called short corn. It will be part of a smart corn system, but the corn is a little bit shorter than the tall hybrids that you see in the fields now, and their center of gravity is a little bit lower. And so we've had some very, very extreme windstorms go through the Midwest in the last 2 years called derechos, and they've just flattened the corn in where they run through the fields. And so the tall corn just gets flattened to the ground, and growers cannot harvest. So this is a field that's been planted, fertilized, crop protection, and zero yield. That's a bad day for the grower and I think for the environment. But the short corn stands in the face of these incredible windstorms. And so these kinds of innovations are really going to help places like North America and South America, who really produce a lot of the food or grain that goes to other parts of the world, to be able to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and to be able to produce more food, per acre. But one of the big, that's for us the sweet spot, and we are using our knowledge in these crops to help smallholder farmers in other parts of the world to use that knowledge to build their crops as well. But the other piece that we need kind of is a crystal ball. The products that we're putting on the market today were developed, identified, discovered, imagined 15 to 20 years ago. This is a very long process getting things into the field. And so as climate continues to change faster and faster, we need to be able to keep up. And so we really need to be able to see what's coming in the next 20 or 15 years. And I know people are developing these models to help us predict, but I think that's a key piece of what we need going forward. Thanks.
That's great, Shelley. Pete, how about you? From the Soybean Innovation Lab perspective, what's success, and what do you need to achieve it?
We focused at that last mile really about the transformation of whether it be production agriculture, small and medium holders, seed companies, the practitioners who are actually in the field, in the factory, operating with soybean, and having them be able and getting them prepared to handle technology is really our mission. And their inability to handle technology has really held back emerging market farmers, processors, seed companies. So our success is measured in their adoption of technology and their deployment at scale of that technology. For us, there are a number of constraints, but now the exciting part is that the ability to handle technology and the recognition. There are just a lot of mature businesses, organizations, farmers, producers out there. Now becomes a credit problem, which is almost a good problem to have in a sense, and bringing capital to recognize that the producers and processors and industry in Africa can handle the technology. They just need the capital to finance it and then deploy it. Because the demand for soy, as you saw from the chart I presented, is scorching. Prices are higher across sub-Saharan Africa than you'd see in the Chicago price or any price that a Western farmer receives. The demand is out there. It's now we're at the point and the opportunity to meet that demand. So it's an exciting time for technology and technology providers, We now just need to match that with capital.
Great. Yeah, good, important thoughts on that. And I'll just add to that the message that I have from Kaneka about this question, which for them, they are quite focused on basic research, but on choosing important traits and on the development of efficient transformation technologies. Their prime focus is on enabling further systems for gene editing in major crops, such as soybean, which they feel will be very important to delivering some of that technology. So one of the questions that we have is really about the whole ecosystem of what is the future system for delivering these kinds of innovations. And there's a question about challenging whether this type of major agricultural approach, which is dominated by corporations and biotech, is really the best approach. If there's more diverse kind of agricultures or a more sustainable practice. And I'd just love to hear any of the panelists comment on what their views are on a functional system for delivering on these goals.
Nick, go ahead.
I'm happy to come in. I mean, I've seen the question in the chat around agroecology, and I think the thing I would say is that I think it's been said before that there are no silver bullets. None of these technologies in their own right are going to answer all of our problems. We have a lot to learn from smallholder farmers and a lot to learn from diverse agricultural practice. But notwithstanding that, I think it's going to be impossible for us to really feed the world sustainably in the light of the climate emergency without innovation. We need to deploy the best scientific minds across the world for this problem, because it's really urgent, and doing nothing is no longer an option. We have to change our agricultural systems, and we've got to do it rather rapidly. As Shelley said, I think Elle said the same. That we have to do this. There's an imperative to what we need to do. So for me, it's a case of making sure that all of these communities actually talk to each other. That's one of the whole points of COP. I don't think that we're on a different side to the NGOs and the environmental lobby groups. We care passionately about the climate emergency, and I think we need to actually learn from each other in the way in which we deploy technologies. There's clearly more we can do to understand the sustainability of, for example, intercropping type of technologies, the way in which you can lower the selective pressure for diseases to emerge. There's a lot of engagement we need to do in our area, in the area of pathogen surveillance, for instance, which is going to be so important. All of the experience we have with working with smallholder farmers in sub-Saharan Africa suggests to me that they're very receptive to dialogue and to engagement. And it is really an engagement and a dialogue in those areas. And I've learned a tremendous amount by talking to people working in those areas and directly to growers. But also they are very receptive to the idea of deploying new technologies too.
Anybody else have a view on that?
Yeah, I think these the question of distribution of the benefits of the technology are really primary here, and include not only smallholders in that mix, but biodiversity and climate as well, about really what are the trade-offs. And when you work like we do at the last mile with actual practitioners who are bearing the risk of putting the crop in or taking a crop and processing it and trying to sell the food and feed products and so forth. It's a very, very challenging environment of balancing. And the key is, at least for us, is to assure that all of these considerations and weights and benefits and trade-offs are are thought of ahead of time and are transparent. And I think that's something that for the organizations, farmers, and then the governments who are asking for USAID to bring soybean to their countries. They're balancing and struggling with these very, very important issues, but they do look at a landscape of low productivity. They do look at a landscape of poverty, soil degradation, and they're looking on how to achieve that, improve those improvements, not 20 years out or 30 years out, but start to make those incremental changes now. And these are very hard choices and decisions, and discussions like this really, really are helpful. We're involved in them all the time. Soybean playing a role in that, both in a positive way, and also adapting soybean more effectively in soybean systems is really just so valuable. And so this is, I think these comments are spot on, and certainly in my 20 years of work in South America, the industry there continues to wrestle with this. These are challenging issues.
Maybe to build on a few of your comments, I did hear a talk or a presentation from the FAO when we were first starting this TR4 alliance, and they commented that some of the rural farmers in Africa only get about 10% of the value from their land, so their productivity is extremely low, and part of that is because of pests that kind of ravage the plants and diseases that come in. And if we could do in bananas, what we did in South America with biotech products that control pests in corn and soybeans, you could have a huge impact. I mean, there's a lot of growth between 10% and 100% of productivity off of land. And so if we could introduce these biotech products there, I think there's a lot that could be gained, but there is a lot of regulatory backlash from doing that. But the other part is, part of this TR4 alliance, there's a group from COP27, I think, that's developing modules that go out and help growers understand, what do you do if the disease gets into your banana orchard? How do you contain it, because it can spread? What are the precautions that you take to keep it out of your field? And so there's a lot of education going on, I think, with growers in some of these areas that can really help as well, prior to being able to get these products out there that are really going to help them. Because I don't know how much you know about banana breeding, but seed to seed is about, which of course bananas don't actually have seeds, but seed to seed is about 2 years. And so the breeding programs are super extended, and it's just going to take a very long time to get this stuff out on the market. But if we could use gene editing, so much faster, once we identify the right genes. And those are the sorts of things that we're trying to do with this TR4 Alliance. Thanks.
I think, listening to the comments from the other panelists, what struck me is we need all the approaches, right? We need agroecology, we need gene editing, we need better breeding techniques. We need a very large toolbox for the challenges that are up ahead. I also think that, any grower is the expert on her own field, on his own field. They know that space the best. And I think everyone is pushing to produce as much from their land as they can. And so it's about access to a lot of things, but I think actually access to distribution of the products and access to a market, so that when you invest in, higher quality seed or fertilizer, you have a place to sell it. That alone is a big dynamic. I think that is really challenging if you invest this time and this labor, and then the distribution isn't where it needs to be. But absolutely, I think we need all different types of approaches for the upcoming changes that we're facing in agriculture.
Well, we're coming up to the end of our discussion period. And if I could summarize some of the points that have been raised here today, and I just want to thank all the panelists for very thoughtful comments about the different areas that they're working in. What I understand through the COP meeting and some of the discussions here that really the goal is the urgent need to accelerate innovation so that we can build a food system that has improved efficiencies of production, that reduces greenhouse gas emission, that conserves nature, that it maintains soil sustainably, that increases resilience and improves livelihoods. All of those to make sure that it's profitable and can go forward. Camille, among others, mentioned how poorly funded agricultural research is. And it is actually shocking. It's about, over the past 20 years, there's been very little increase in ag funding, considerable increases in other forms of R&D, such that about 26 times the amount of funding goes to non-ag. And that needs to change. And I think from here at the COP, it sounds like there are some new mechanisms changing that. I think another thing that I'm pulling out from this discussion, it sounds in each of you, and as you're describing your areas, are relying on different kinds of creative partnerships. So whether they're with government agencies, other science organizations, small companies, large companies, farmers, all of that makes an ecosystem for advancing this kind of work, which I think is critical to, as rapidly as possible, addressing some of these problems. I loved what Nick said, that we have the science to do things now. It's not that we need to go looking extensively. We have things that we can move forward now. So it's more about acceleration. Elle mentioned about engaging with smallholders and always putting them at the center if we're thinking about delivering benefits for them. And that is certainly critical. And I think also part of these ecosystems that are needed to put together the right combination of partners. Shelley mentioned education. And I would also say that that's part of it. I know Pete spends a great deal of time thinking about extension and making sure that growers learn best practices and understand more about technology. And Shelley also made two comments, which is there's lots of room for improvement. So that's encouraging. And it would be nice to have a crystal ball. Agriculture is a long-term, and research is a long-term process. And we do need to get these innovations out urgently, given the timeframes that we're working under in terms of climate and population growth. So I just want to sum it up to ask each of you to just, in as brief words as possible as we finish, to say, what is the one thing you think the world needs to know about delivering this system that involves different partners to produce these better food systems? And I'm just going to start with Pete Goldsmith.
Quickly unmute. Yeah, there's so much, not just potential, but activity underway in sub-Saharan Africa, in agriculture, and it warrants a good look from technology suppliers and capital providers.
Great. Elle.
Yeah, I think it's that, there's a lot of potential to change how we think about nitrogen and how it's delivered to the plants. And just repeating the point that I think smallholders should be at the center of climate change conversations.
Nick.
Well, I definitely agree with the two comments of my two panelists who've just gone before. Absolutely. I would say I think the message to policymakers is that doing nothing is no longer an option. We actually need to act really in a coordinated way to actually deal with the impending climate emergency in terms of the development of new agricultural practices. And as I've sort of emphasized, that we have a lot of the scientific know-how already. Yes, we need more funding, and we need, but I think a lot of this is actually down to coordination and a better and a better and sort of transparent regulatory system, which inspires public confidence and enables us to move forward. And as I say, trying to actually ensure that the relevant NGOs in this space actually see us as actually part of the solution and not part of the problem, because I think we could do with actually working together in the face of this overwhelming climate emergency which we have to deal with.
Excellent. Camille.
I can only highlight what other panelists said. I think we are so advanced with the climate collapse. There is no one holy grail and single solution. We need to be open-minded and use every possible technologies we have. So to the policymakers and politicians, be open-minded, listen to the scientific evidence. We have a lot of tools we can use. We just need help from you.
Very good. And Shelley?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo what a lot of other people said. We definitely need more rapid adoption of new technologies, but it's not only the policymakers, it's the public. In the United States, you know, we have transgenic plants, but people won't eat them. And this is a decision that our society has made that impacts the rest of the world. It's the same thing with Europe. They've decided this is not what we're going for, potentially not even going to accept gene editing. This affects the rest of the world. These are decisions that are made without really considering the science behind it. And so my ask would be not only for the regulators, but for people who have plenty of food and huge amounts of food choices to start thinking a little bit more data-driven about their decisions and how they affect the rest of the world. Because we do have the technologies we need, we just can't deploy them. Thanks.
Great. Well, that was a really great discussion. I'm grateful to all of you for spending your time on a Saturday to talk about these important topics. And I apologize to our audience that we couldn't get to all of the questions that we had. We really filled the time a great deal, but a lot of other good questions were there. And with that, I'd just like to close the session and thank you all for each working to try to build the future that we would like to see